If 2019 was a school kid standing in front of us all right now answering for its behaviour and its results so far, we would have some cause to be happy, I guess. However, we'd also have some serious reasons to consider expelling the child entirely and disowning them completely. Alright, let's drop this weird metaphor for a second and just say it's been a pretty topsy-turvy year for the film industry at large, with some major disappointments that Ash covered here in this lovely video, plug, some outright abominations that we'll get to in a future video, but also some absolutely outstanding highlights. Because while yeah, there have been a lot of duds in 2019 so far, the cinematic highs this year have been towering enough to make up for them, and then some. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are the 10 best movies of 2019 so far. But first up, some honourable mentions. The Lego Movie 2 was a surprising highlight of the early months, with heart and humour to spare, and a pretty moving story about sibling rivalry. Hail Satan, on the other hand, was a gripping documentary that came out of nowhere, while The Last Watch, the documentary about Game of Thrones' final season, was arguably more emotional and compelling than a lot of its final episodes. Fighting with My Family, a biopic of a WWE star made by Stephen Merchant and in conjunction with the WWE themselves, should have never worked. However, thanks to a lovingly crafted, uplifting story and great performances, it turned out to be a supremely joyful watch. On the inverse of this, Gaspar Noé's climax delivered one of the best horrors of the year, and should be commended for being the first film from the director in a while that doesn't have a scene where someone jacks off directly into the camera lens, so yeah, thanks for that, Gaspar. All of these movies are worth checking out, but here's the 10 that kept them from greatness. Number 10, SpiderMan Far From Home. Following up Avengers Endgame was always going to be a gargantuan task, but Spider-Man Far From Home made the correct decision to go smaller and deliver a more personal superhero tale where the entire fate of the universe wasn't hanging in the balance. Though taking Spidey out of New York could have been a disaster, Peter Parker's gap year was everything you'd expect from this new John Hughes-inspired version of the Wallcrawler, with even more time spent on developing Peter's relationship with his classmates, MJ and himself, than in Homecoming. Jake Gyllenhaal's Mysterio isn't quite at the level of Michael Keaton's Vulture, but he's still one of the MCU's most laid antagonists, and the actor brings an infectious amount of theatricality to the role. Far From Home could have felt throwaway, but it's more ambitious than its predecessor and delivers some genuinely jaw-dropping moments of visual spectacle. Number 9, The Art of Self-Defense. The idea of a film about Jesse Eisenberg learning karate as a means to affirm himself in an increasingly isolating world where he struggles to stem the tide of toxic masculinity is, well, it's odd, at least on paper. When you add in the fact that The Art of Self-Defense is actually a pitch-black comedy and feels more like a tongue-in-cheek but completely straight-faced fight club than something like We Need to Talk About Kevin, it gets even stranger. The result, though, is an absolutely wonderful revelation. Eisenberg plays accountant Casey Davis, cursed with a quote girl's name, like what his earlier role Mark Zuckerberg might have been without the coding ingenuity. When he's beaten up indiscriminately by a motorcycle gang, he turns to a karate class to reclaim his identity. The tone is the most rewarding part of all of this, though, as it's an absurdist farce told with such seriousness that it's utterly hysterical. Number 8, Long Shot. Last year, Game Night was one of the biggest surprises thanks to its disarming charm, solid laughs, and great performances. It also made a fair bit of money for a comedy, which is always doubly impressive and suggested there's still a good market for comedies that don't inherently seek cynicism or nastiness. Unfortunately, a film that is equally as good came out this year, and pretty much nobody saw it, despite the presence of Seth Rogen and Charlize Theron at the top of the bill. That's a shame because Long Shot was a charming, infectious tale of a presidential candidate who falls in love with one of her writers, who she used to babysit by the way, who's everything that she shouldn't be dating. It's a fairly conventional story of moral integrity and fighting for the right things, with an ecological and obviously anti-corporate government message in there, but it works so well because it's funny and endearing and you really do root for the leads. Hopefully it'll find a bigger audience when it comes out at home release. Number 7, Midsommar. Midsommar is not the movie you think it is. The second feature from Ari Aster, following his terrifying debut Hereditary, has been pitched as yet another twisted, disturbed tale from one of the best horror directors working today, but that description might actually set the flick up to fail. Because while it certainly does have some haunting, intense sequences, especially in the first 10 minutes, which are as bleak as horror cinema gets, Midsommar is also intentionally very, very funny. Our heroes clashing with the culture of a Wicker Man-style pagan cult is so surreal and mad that you can't help but laugh. It's big banter, but that only makes the moments of horror even more effective. Not everyone is going to have the patience for it, but Aster's ethereal drama is a cinematic experience unlike any other, and low-key one of the best ever films about a messy breakup played against the backdrop of drugs, murder, and of course, massive orgies. Number 6, Us. There were major expectations going into Us, Jordan Peele's second feature and follow-up to the world-conquering Get Out, and in hindsight it was probably always destined to be far more divisive than the director's Oscar-nominated debut. Though it has a relatively simple premise, a family is tormented by doubles of themselves, Us actually has some rather ridiculous ambitions. It really does shoot for the stars, and while it doesn't always live up to its lofty vision, it attempts it with such confidence and gusto that you can't help but just love it. It's funny, scary, and proves why Jordan Peele is one of the best new filmmakers working today. It might always be in the shadow of Get Out, but pretty much anything after that film would have been, and that ain't a knock against it. Number 5, Burning. Burning continues to showcase why Steven Yeun is one of the most underrated actors working today, as the actor delivers an ambiguous, creepy performance in the year's best psychological thriller. It is a slow burn, oi, and at 2.5 hours is perhaps a little longer than it needs to be, but the mystery film all about the apparent disappearance of the main character's love interest is so poetic and visually stunning that it's easy to give in totally to its charms. Drenched in atmosphere, the thriller bends the perception of reality itself, until you're not sure if you can trust even your own eyes. Consequently, it's the kind of movie that you'll be thinking about long after it's over, with its eerie, haunting imagery having the kind of staying power that will make it one of the defining movies of 2019. Number 4, Puddle Turn. Netflix's output this year has been a bit of a mixed bag to say the least, but their best was easily one of the most profound, touching, and devastating movies of the entire year, hell, maybe even of the entire decade. Puddle Turn had a running start thanks to the casting of Ray Romano and Mark Duplass as a pair of longtime best friends who together deal with a fatal diagnosis of cancer, and Duplass's decision to end his life to preempt any suffering. But instead of this being a hard-wringing journey to moralize the right to die, it's a quiet, intoxicating meditation on life and friendship. There's no romanticism either. It's a fairly stark but deeply charming story of two people unified by this awful impending thing and their attempts to hastily get through what amounts to a bucket list. It's bound to be sad, obviously, but by the end, you'll feel something like you've had your soul wrung out. Number 3, Toy Story 4. Hark back to those naysayers who said we didn't need more Toy Story earlier this year, because oh my god, how wrong we all were. So wrong. Sure, Toy Story 3 had a great ending, but it wasn't satisfying for Woody. It simply restated the deep-lying horror that toys just had to accept that life moved on and that they'd be abandoned or passed on or forgotten. That wasn't any real sort of ending for Woody. It was one aimed at appeasing the audience and making us feel better. Toy Story 4 reclaimed Woody's story for him, refocusing on his abandonment anxieties and telling his existential crisis through the twin stories of Gabby, and Forky. It's a beautiful journey, and not just because of the stunning special effects, though, oh my god, look at this rain, and oh my god, look at the stitching on Woody's arm. This is amazing. The story is just great, and if you didn't cry and feel reaffirmed by that ending, well, you've got a heart made of plastic. Number 2, Booksmart. Completing the trifecta of game-changing coming-of-age movies following Lady Bird and 8th Grade, Booksmart is perhaps the perfect blend of both of their styles. Like those films, Olivia Wilde's debut retains the raw authenticity that put other flicks in the subgenre to shame, while still delivering a conventional comedy that has mass appeal, aesthetically skewing closer to something like Superbad than Wilde's indie roots. Leads Catalan Diva and Beanie Feldstein bounce off each other brilliantly brilliantly, both displaying great comedic timing but also the huge emotional range required for the more dramatic sequences. The relationship between their characters feels so truthful as well, and it's refreshing to see a friendship like this played out without the underlying bitchiness that Hollywood loves to focus on so much. It's also far weirder than you'd expect as well, with one Barbie-related set piece acting as a hilarious highlight. Number 1. Avengers Endgame. Not only was Avengers Endgame a stunning spectacle, the likes of which nobody a few years ago could possibly have thought they'd ever see, it was also one of the most authentically devastating films of the entire year. After the explosive ending of Infinity War and a tidal wave of hype and expectation unlike almost anything else, the Russo's Infinity Saga ending epic was the perfect marriage of humor, heart, and sublime spectacle. Aesthetically, it drew from comic splash pages and somehow managed to tell a universe-threatening story at the same time as a deeply personal one. And of course, there's that ending. From the opening of the portals through to the cheeseburgers and the I Love You 3000, it offers just about the most complete emotional rollercoaster of any year. Seriously, I need to lie down, but if you need more convincing, then check out the 1 million other great videos we've done on Avengers so far this year. So that's our list. What do you guys think down in the comments below? Were there any movies that you think deserved a spot on this list? And while you're there, could you give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to whatculture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye.